But I said to Liz yesterday, because I hadn't brought it up.
Councillors, we're now live. Okay, councillors, please stand. Welcome, councillors, members of the executive and the general public through our live stream to this penultimate meeting for this term at Swan Rural City Council, and the first to be held under the new Local Government Act governance rules. Swan Rural City Council acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and pays its respects to their elders, past and present. Councillor McPhee, prayer please.
We beseech you, Lord, that we may be granted wisdom, understanding and sincerity of purpose in the decisions we are called on to make for the welfare of the people of the rural city of Swan Hill.
Thank you, Mr McPhee. Please be seated. Mr McLean, do we have any apologies?
No, Mr Mayor, all councillors are present.
Directors and officers present. May the minutes please show all directors and officers that are present.
So noted, Mr Mayor.
Confirmation of minutes.
I'll move the minutes of the last meeting be accepted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Yes, Councillor Johnson. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Any disclosures of conflict of interest, please? There being none. Thank you. Joint letters and reading of petitions. Mr McKinnon, do we have any?
No, Mr Mayor, there are no joint letters or petitions presented.
Thank you. Public question time. Do we have any questions from the general public?
No, Mr Mayor, there have been no public questions submitted.
Thank you. Open forum. Now, due to, this is new in our agenda, due to COVID-19 restrictions, we cannot have an open forum at this point in time, and we will be advised when we can by the Chief Health Officer in due course. Section B, reports. Mr McCollum.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Report 20.65 and also 20.66 are of a similar nature. They are motions for the council to lift the report from the table. And we'll deal with the first in the first. 20.65. At the ordinary meeting held on the 21st of July, the planning permit application for the use of land for a contractor's depot report was laid on the table to enable council officers to meet with the objector and the applicant for further refine the conditions. So that meeting has now occurred, and recommending that this report be lifted from the table so that the matter can be dealt with in this agenda.
Thank you. Now, this is a procedural motion, so we simply go to a vote.
No, there's no motion, Mr Mayor. I'd like a question first.
Yes, okay.
Just in relation to this, you say you give the officers an opportunity to speak to the objectors. When were the objectors spoken to?
Can you give us the date, Ms Green?
After the first meeting, which was sometime after, they never got back. We have received a letter from them, all councillors, and I think the staff as well, about not getting back to them with their concerns.
Yes, so I might respond. So there was certainly a meeting held with council planning staff and the objectors, and my recollection is, and the applicant, and that was approximately 2 to 3 weeks after the council report. There was then some discussions and suggestions made, but we have not then gone back to the objectors to discuss those further, which is the subject of their letter. And so Ms Green might be able to add, Mr Mayor, if that's possible.
And that's the following question is, why didn't we get back to them, and why haven't we given them the opportunity to hear what was going to be resolved this morning?
So we did in the last week provide them with a copy of the conditions proposed prior to us receiving the letter from the mayor. But they're certainly not done promptly following the meeting on site, that's for sure, which was an oversight.
Any further questions, councillors? There being none, I'll ask for a mover. There being no mover, it means this stays on the table.
Stays on the table.
Stays on the table.
And I guess the implications from that, Mr Mayor, our councillor are requesting that staff complete the cycle of discussion with the objector and the applicant before it's then brought back.
Absolutely.
Understood. Thank you.
Item B 20.66, motion to lift the report off the table. Mr McLinnan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and this is in relation to an item that was dealt with at the meeting of the 18th of August, community support. There was a notice of motion from Councillor Mackay, which was laid on the table as Councillor Mackay was not present. Council decided to refer this report to this ordinary meeting, so recommending that this item be lifted from the table.
Questions, councillors? There being no questions, can I have a mover, please? Yes.
I move the motion that we lift it off the table.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Anne. Yes. All those in favour? Carries. Item B 20.67, appointment of two councillors to sign our financial statements. Ms Morris, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Under the Local Government Act, we are required to appoint two councillors as authorised to produce the annual financial statements and performance statement. These annual statements comprise of both the general purpose financial statements, which are prepared in accordance with the Australian Accounting Standards, and the performance statement, which is prepared in accordance with the Local Government Act. These statements are being reviewed by the Audit Committee on the 8th of October, and then the Auditor General's Office is currently reviewing these documents. Our intent is to bring this back to the October Council meeting for an info statements, and then it will, following the audits of the Auditor General's opinion, once we receive that back, we'll bring it back for formal adoption to the Council meeting in early November, and December, depending on the timing of that audit opinion. In the past, we have requested that the people that we consider to come to be able to sign for these documents will be able to come into their office at short notice. And in the past, the practice has been that we have had the mayor and one other councillor as the signatories. So we're recommending that council appoint the two officers to sign the annual financial and the performance statement once the audit clearance has been given.
Thank you, Ms Morris. Any questions, please? Yes.
Just a question of yourself and maybe the Deputy Mayor. Are you both in a position to attend when required?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll do the motion, Mr Mayor.
Motion to that effect?
The council appoint the Mayor and Deputy Mayor, or Councillor Moore and Councillor Jeffrey, to sign annual financial performance statements.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Councillor Benham? Do you speak to the motion?
No.
No need.
Yep. All those vote in favour? Carried unanimously. Item B 20.68, long-term financial plan 2021 to 2029 and 30. Ms Morris, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I've actually brought along Warren Snyder, our Chief Financial Officer, who's going to present this report to you today.
Thanks,
Thank
Alan.
you, Mr. Snyder.
Through you, Mr Mayor. This is another requirement of the Local Government Act to have a 10-year financial plan. We did discuss this a fortnight ago at an assembly, and there were a couple of changes that we've made to page 9 and 12 in relation to the aged care reforms and an explanation of the on-cost, employee cost. But to start off with, the long-term financial plan, as we discussed a fortnight ago, is just that. It's a roadmap for the council for the next 10 years. It basically enables us to factor in certain events and scenarios around our operational budget. For example, the Robinvale housing arrangement that we've got going over the next 3 years, it will factor in the subdivision for that and the sale of the development properties and the sale of those properties, and be funded out of our future reserve and money going back in that way. So there's a lot of those sorts of things going through. A lot of the information comes from our accounting profession as far as forward estimates are concerned with projections. A lot of it comes from our banking institutions as well, and the media. We know ourselves what our EBA has been in the past 3 years. We will know it again later on this year and early next year. So all those sorts of factors are placed through this document as well. It also identifies what our debt redemption will be over the next 10 years. I'm pleased to say it'll be 99% less than it is right now. So it'll be $44,000 in 10 years' time. So that's a great position to be in. Most of that debt will fall off next year when our interest-only loan with the local government funding vehicle matures. Similarly, we've got events like Tower Hill Estate, the development of that, and the sale of those properties. It's pleasing to note that Tower Hill is now cash flow positive for the first time since it started. So that's a big win for the organisation, and it's currently returning 1% of our rate rise to the bottom line in our budgets, and we hope to make that even more in the years to come. It also factors in other things like our short-term planning and management of COVID-19. We have got forward projections on a going concern basis to see how we're going to perform this current financial year. Last year, on a race determination basis, we nearly broke even. We were about $7,000 less than our forecast actual. So that's also pleasing with the action the council and management have taken on that part. So I guess the whole report, like we said, has been discussed with council. We're looking for the long-term plan to be adopted, so we can make this the basis of our budgets going forward. So it's basically the first 10, it provides the information for the first 10-year major projects and our first year operational budget. So I'm just looking for a motion from councillors to adopt the long-term plan for 2021 through to 29-30.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Any questions, councillors? Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. As with any plan, Mr. Snyder, our 10-year financial plan, this is obviously a living document, and if you realise it can change, like our major projects plan, and any plan we do have, it's not set in stone. We can change it at any time.
Yes, for you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. Every year we'll bring this plan to you. This is, I think, the 7th long-term plan that we've produced. It hasn't been a financial document we've had for decades. It's certainly only about 7 years old. But it is standing in some good stead going forward, and certainly is reviewed around this time each year.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Snyder, we have $4.47 million in borrowings, which we're aiming to drop down to $400,000 at the end of the 10 years. With the loan principal repayment received of $3.3 million, what are the advantages of us having a reserve and not paying off our loans with the money we've got available?
Well, we have got a reserve, Councillor. We have a loan principal reserve. We've been putting about $700,000 aside each year, so this particular loan that's retiring next year is an interest-only loan, so we're required to pay the interest on a half-yearly basis.
Yep.
But after the 10th year, we need to repay the principal, and we've been budgeting each financial year in the financing activities program about $700,000 to $800,000 each year for that $4.7 million to be retired.
Thank
we
you.
have been reserve accounting for it.
Thank you.
Councillor McKay, did you have a question? Yes. Any further questions, Councillor? I have a mover, please. Thanks.
There's a motion as per the recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yeah, just quickly, Mr. Mayor. If you look through the report on page 25, they talk about the Victoria Auditor General Office measures. It shows that we're in a good position with most of our areas in the green, which is pleasing to see. It's a traffic light system, green, yellow and red. Anything in the red means we're not tracking as well. Obviously, like the question I asked, this is a 10-year plan, which can change. It's a living document, and each year it is revised, as Mr. Snyder said. And over the past couple of councils I've been involved in, we have been looking at trying to get debt-free, and this is targeting at 2030, 2031, that we will be debt-free, which is pleasing to see. I think we're in a good financial position. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Snyder and his team, and obviously our outgoing director had a big part to play in this prior to his leaving the organisation, but I'm sure we're in a great position going ahead, so thank you to your team for the past time.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yep. Certainly, this 10-year financial Treasury plan does give council, shows that council is in a stronger financial position, which is always positive, and I'm also in favour of council getting into a debt-free scenario. But as Councillor McPhee has highlighted, it's a living document that can be that is reviewed annually and is subject to changes that the council wishes to make. So I've always been for trying to get debt-free, but depending on projects that council endeavour into the future may require further loans. So, but I'm happy with the plan and the direction that we've got council going. Thank you.
Any further speakers for the motion? Any against the motion? Would you like to close, Councillor McPhee?
No, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll move to vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Item B 20.69, asset disposal policy. Ms. Petcover, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report seeks a council resolution to adopt the asset disposal policy. The policy formalises the current processes to ensure consistency and control in relationship to the disposal of council assets. There are some exceptions in which assets are covered under this policy, and those exceptions are the library books, the historical collections, artworks, impounded items, crown land, stock, domestic animals and abandoned vehicles, and also the discontinuance and the disposal of roads is managed through a different policy, which is also going to be presented to the council meeting today. So I'm open for questions.
Any questions, councillors? Yes, Councillor McKay.
Does Crown land include all land owned by council, or can some land owned by council be disposed of under this policy? So true, Mr. Mayor, Crown land is excluded from the scope of this policy, so it cannot be disposed of under this policy.
I think my question was, is all the land that, so can other land owned by council be disposed of under this policy, or is all, so do we own land that's not Crown land?
Yes, yes, true, Mr. Mayor. Buildings and land that's privately owned by council can be disposed through this policy, and it does require council resolution for the disposal.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? There being none, can I have a mover, please? Yes, moved Councillor Johnson. Seconder, please. Councillor Bean, do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor
No, I
Johnson?
think the policy and procedures are very straightforward. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Any further speakers?
No, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, go to a vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Item B, 20.70, Memorials Policy. Ms. Petcover.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of the memorial policy is to provide guidance, consistency and control in relation to the use of public open space for the placement of memorials. And with the adoption of this policy, the current roadside memorial policy will be superseded. So the intention is that this policy will be used as a guidance for the members of the community who would like to commemorate a loved one or a group in a public space, and it sets out the expectations and the responsibilities for the owner of the memorial and the council, and the communication between the parties when the time comes for the memorial to either be removed or renewed.
Thank you. Questions, councillors? Yes.
Just to clarify, Ms. Petcover, as far as memorials go, sometimes they cause a bit of angst. The person that wants the memorial loves the person or the activity or whatever it is that's brought the request on, and then there may be a number of people in the immediate vicinity or the community that really don't agree with the placement of a memorial. So what's the process as far as making sure that people are aware of what's going to be put in place?
So the process is still fluid because there is a procedure that will underpin the policy, and that's going to be developed based on the policy that's here today. But the intention is that the whole immediate family needs to approve of the memorial being erected, and it has to comply with the asset naming policy and other policies that the council has at the time. So at the moment it is disposal policy, the memorial policy and the asset naming policy. So it has to be compliant, and it will be advertised, just like anything that goes under the asset naming policy.
So there's a 28-day period or something for feedback. Yeah, thank you.
Any further questions? Yes.
Yeah, Ms. Petcover, just with regard to the report under environmental implications, where it's noted that native vegetation or cultural heritage issues may arise during the asset installation, and I would assume that this comes and will coming the procedures, but would this be at the applicant's expense as well, or is this at council's expense?
Everything through you, Mr Mayor, is intended to be at the applicant's expense.
Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? There being none, can I call for a mover, please?
I'll move a motion, just a slight amendment on the recommendation that council adopt the memorial use policies as presented, with just a spell check on the road definition within the policy. There's just a couple of words that should be used an all instead of us and all. So just with a spell check of the road definition.
Sorry?
So I'm happy to adopt, I'm moving a motion we adopt as presented, but with a spell check of the road definition. And just continues the roadside memorial use policy.
Yeah, on the roads definition.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
yes, thank you.
That's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Spell check on the roads
Yeah,
definition.
the roads
Yep.
definition.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, in the actual policy.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, do you have a second, please? Yes, Councillor Bennett? Do you speak on the motion?
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, we have had some requests for memorials in the past and we will in the future. And the policy we review is to fall in line with the local government, the new Local Government Act. And just, yeah, this is a slight is an us and or instead of in the road definition, which is a typo that when you write documents, you speed read it and you miss those little areas. So it's just a slight correction, but happy with the policy as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you. Any speakers? All or against? There being none, there will be a vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Item B, 20.71, Swan Hill Aerodrome Upgrade Projects. Mr. Carter, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report seeks approval for the implementation of the improvement program of $3.323,412, of which $1.223,412 are the grants provided under the Regional Airport Program 1. We are aiming to achieve two objectives with these works. One is the upgrade and renewal of some of our current existing assets, and the other one is the creation of opportunities for natural growth by opening additional hangar spaces and parking apron, which will also assist with the Jet A fuel that's been installed as we speak. So the list of projects proposed as part of this program are on your pages 50 and 51. And the approximate split, if you're interested, is $2 million is renewal works, and about 1.3, 1.4 is the new works.
Thank you. Questions, councillors? Yes, Councillor McLeod.
Yeah, just a couple of things, Mr Mayor. Obviously the time frame for all this works is to be completed by 2021, is it?
Yes.
Financial year. And any of these proposed works, will they need to be modified? There's a notice of motion coming up later about investigating the opportunity for charging planes for landing, that type of thing, on our aerodromes. Any of this work has an impact on that happening into the future?
No, that's just another piece of equipment.
And the last question, Mr Mayor. In all this works, where are we at with the master plan for the aerodrome?
We haven't progressed any further work with the master planning. That will come as a bigger project when consultation can be more extensive and wide-reaching. This is really just to keep the current asset and the current levels of service going and allow for a few additional hangar spaces.
Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? Yes, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In the subtotal titled Other Projects Not Shown on the Plan and Not Planned to Deliver at this stage, what's the priority with those, and are they part of that aerodrome master plan?
So true, Mr Mayor, when there will be a master plan, yes, they will form part of the project that needs to be considered. At the moment, they are out of scope, mainly for financial reasons, but we are going to put infrastructure in place so we can implement those projects. For example, the first one is the apron lighting installation. We will do the electrical conduits, we're just not going to install the lights. So we'll be ready for the next stage when funding becomes available.
Great, thank you.
And it just improves security for users.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? There being none, can we go for the mover, please? Yes, Pete.
I'll move the motion as per the recommendation, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. And we have a seconder. Yes,
I'll second,
Councillor
Mr. Mayor.
Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor McPhee?
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, this work has been in our 10-year major projects plan for a while. It's coming out in the next couple of years. It's pleasing to see the federal government has come to part with $1.2 million, which has helped us complete even further works on our aerodrome. In this day of technology and accessibility, we need to maintain a good aerodrome in this region for all the services that are here. The time I've been on council, there has been a number of businesses have looked at the opportunities having a passenger service from Swan Hill. That could be a situation into the future. We've got to keep all our options open in relation to that. To be accessible from Melbourne and the major cities around Australia is important, and it will make a big impact on us as a region if we maintain this facility. And it's a lot cheaper to maintain something than let it deteriorate and then try and build it back up. I think this is important work that needs to be done. This is totally irrelevant from any flying school. This was always going to be done. And I think it's a great bit of work to keep our region in the forefront of any future possibilities for air travel. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, totally agree with everything that Councillor McPhee has said. I think it's also important to note that these upgrades help to ensure the health security, I suppose, and the mindset of our community members, with the ability of the air ambulance to be able to land here and take off, and all of those sorts of things, and other emergency aircraft that come with an upgraded aerodrome and tarmac. So it's great to see it happen, and let's hope that there will be a regional airports program too that can fund the projects that we haven't been able to fund in this one. Thank you.
Any further speakers for the motion? Any speakers against the motion?
I would like to suggest an amendment. Is that possible at this time?
Yes, it is possible at this time.
We are about to spend $3.323 million on the airport, which we support. I would like to suggest that an amendment be added, that we make an allowance of $50,000 within that amount for the purposes of charging for landing, as we follow the investigation suggested in the following notice of motion, so that we have something allocated to enable that to be expedited within that budget.
That's
Make an allowance of $50,000 within the budget to enable charging, to enable income stream from charging airport users.
Can I ask a question to the council, Mr Mayor? Yeah. If she's going to take $50,000 out, which project does she take out of the thing? Because one project's not going to be able to be done.
Something's not.
So can you nominate which project comes out?
Sure. Is it? I guess I'm bringing up is that a possibility? Is it so tight that it's not a possibility?
Through you, Mr Mayor, it's reasonably tight. As you can see, some of the projects have budgets of 15,000 and have to be budgeted separately. So, although when we go to public tender, the prices might change, but this is the best estimate that we can provide at this point in time. And unfortunately, usually when you go to tender, the prices come higher rather than lower.
Okay. So we make an allowance within the budget if anything's costed under predicted.
Mr Mayor, to assist the meeting, if I may, I was going to suggest that they be funded from savings if they eventuate.
Yes.
And if not, that it be brought back to council once the project's completed. The alternative is the council could nominate a project And I would be suggesting that, well, I guess as this project rolls out and we start or finish the delivery, we will know the actual costs of each component. There may be savings, but there may also be some minor cost overruns. If we're going to trim 50,000 out, it's really the terminal building upgrade and the car park spray seal is where we would think about jettisoning some of that.
Mr Mayor, just to save the meeting, if you don't mind, I'm happy to accept as an initial motion, we put that to a part 3 and 1 rather than go to an amendment. That along the lines of what the CEO has suggested. If there's any cost savings in relation to this project, it comes back to council for consideration to be spent in other areas at the airport. And that could be a master plan, or it could be the possibility of charging planes into the future. So any cost savings be brought back to council for council decision.
Want to know that you've got the seconders' agreement to that?
We need
Does it be seconded to that?
Yeah, I agree with that.
That makes sense.
So now, rather than treating that as an amendment, we just incorporate
becomes
that
the
into
initial
the
motion.
Yep, exactly, yep.
Okay.
And if there's any cost savings within the budget.
And I think that'll clarify what's trying to be covered here.
So, Mr Mayor, I think
As you
it's
said, that is dot point 2.
yeah, it's a part
Second dot 2.
the council one. Yeah.
That's it, and dot point 2.
Can I ask a question?
Just before you go, Cal, if there's any cost savings within the budget to be brought back to council for consideration on other uses of the airport.
Other uses at
To
the
consider.
airport.
Yeah, that's right. And can I suggest it's not within the budget, it's within the project?
Yes.
Okay.
And probably should start number 2 with, number 1 is that council 1 approve, and number 2 the council request. Thanks, Sharon. Request that, I guess, request that if there are. Check for the move and second one.
You happy with that?
Yes.
I'm happy with that, thanks Mr Mayor.
You happy? And
Yep.
you're happy?
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor McKay?
Yes, there's been concern within the community that our airports come under increasing use by pilot training from other places, and we are going to consider a motion to look at charging for airport use. This is not intended at all to detrimentally affect current users of the airport. However, we do want to have some planning into the future, and for not that to be into the too distant future, that we can strongly, deeply consider charging for touchdown at our airport as it goes on. The airport upgrades cost a lot of money, and airport use does cause wear and tear on the facility. So, thank you.
Okay. Would the seconder like to speak to the motion?
Don't need to.
It's our initial motion, Mr Mayor.
Okay, so first, sorry, yep. Any further speakers for the motion? Any against the motion? We'll go to a vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Item B 20.72, discontinuance and disposal of roads policy amendments. Mr. Code, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This policy was adopted by Council just over 12 months ago, and this is the first review that it's had. Some of the changes are superficial, so there's no change in the process, and it's the intent is that this policy gets reviewed again next June to incorporate any changes of the Local Government Act that come into effect from the 1st of July next year. So it will be accurate up until the end of June next year.
Thank you. Any questions, councillors? There being no questions, can I ask for a mover, please?
I'll move as per the recommendations.
Councillor Jeffrey, seconded. Councillor McKay. Would you speak to the motion, Councillor Jeffrey?
I think it's just an update on requests that come in to dispose of roads, which are most likely usually unmade from what I've seen, and the process we go through to dispose of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor McKay?
No.
Any further speakers for the motion? Any against? Thank you. We'll go for a vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Item B, 20.73, Community and Event Grants Policy Review. Ms. Brown, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Council has a policy in relation to how it will provide grants both for events, for community projects, and in terms of a school scholarship which is provided across the municipality to schools. It's time for this policy to be reviewed, and there are 3 changes proposed to the policy, one of which is actually the procedure, not the policy, but it's important to be considered, which is to allow for event grant applicants to apply for more than one grant. This is primarily because over the last couple of years we have instigated calculating the cost to council of events even through in-kind and logistics support. So we do require event organisers to apply for funding for those components of their event, not just for cash contributions. So that has meant that there has been at times events that do require logistic support, and then they have another event where they may require event cash. So that's one change, and that is in the procedure rather than the policy. We've updated the advertising procedure as well, again in the procedure, not the policy, and some other fairly minor components to the procedure. So the recommendation is Council adopt the changes to the Community Events Grants Policy, understanding that there are also changes to the procedure.
Questions, councillors? Yes, Councillor McPhee.
Firstly, Ms. Green, in relation to unsuccessful applicants not being brought back to council, is there going to be support for them to upgrade their application for the following year?
Look, absolutely. We try to work with all applicants before they actually put in their application to make sure it's something that can be supported. And where applications have failed to address all the selection criteria, we certainly work with those to achieve that funding next year.
All right. And in relation to the events funding, where you're saying more than one organisation can apply for more than one event, in the past, how many have actually tried to apply for more than one event?
Well, in the past, if it was just the cash component, it would always only be one event. So it's largely around this logistics and in-kind support, so where we do road closures or provide rubbish pickup. There are sometimes more than one event organiser, but as I said, we now account for that cost to council in this fund, whereas we didn't used to. So it happens occasionally, Councillor McPhee, not regularly.
And if we go down this path where we let organisations have more than one event, what's to stop our small communities from getting event funding when you look at it logistically and economically, the whole bit, the council will get more bang for its buck in the bigger centres? How are those smaller communities going to compete against the bigger operators, the more professional operators who apply this event funding?
And I guess that's the criteria that we use to assess the applications. There is no reason why a small community couldn't apply, and which they do using the community grants if it's a local event to suit the local community. If it's a tourism related event, then clearly it should come under the events category. And the criteria, I think, does allow council to differentiate between, as you say, the professional event organisers and the small community groups. The criteria does allow council to give points or score them in relation to the benefit they provide to that smaller community.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions, councillors? If there are no further questions, I'll ask for a mover, please.
I'll move the motion.
Move Councillor McKay. Do we have a second, please? Councillor Jeffrey. Do you wish to speak, Councillor McKay?
The community events policy, the community events program is a great program from council and has fostered a whole lot of community events that have been so successful and nurturing for the large and small community. It's much appreciated. Less subscribed this year than it has been in previous years, and that's quite understandable. And thank you to the council for continuing to support it.
Thank you, Councillor McKay. Councillor Jeffrey.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm happy with the amendment to the procedure policy. And I know during the current COVID times, it's going to be a bit unknown around what events we can run. Although the announcement today by the Andrews government about further ease and restrictions will go some way to allow the community to plan some events going into the future. And obviously, when we get applications from all across the municipality, the committee that sits down and reviews, of which we've got 2 councillors on, and I've been on it before, they do their best to score the applications based on their merit and share the events throughout the municipality. So happy with the amendments and look forward to the next item coming up. Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey. Any further speakers for the motion or against
Yeah,
the
look,
motion?
I'll speak against it, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
Look, the community events grants is a terrific thing that the council does. My biggest concern in relation to this is about the multiple events. Having where you can get professional organisations come in and apply for more than one grant. I'm very concerned that our smaller communities will miss out. I'm not saying anyone around this table that currently as it stands will do this. It is only a policy, but will the intent of this policy go into future councils, go into future officers that come and go throughout the organisation? If I read it black and white, I think it doesn't give the intent there properly enough to ensure that the smaller communities are given the opportunity and don't miss out on funding, because if you look at it economically, they will miss out. Because with all due respect to Councillor Jeffrey, you look at the grant funding coming up, a lot of them are in our major towns. There are some in the small towns, but there's a lot in our major towns as well. That's a concern I have with this in relation to this. I think we've got to have it worded in a way where, or we split the funding up somehow, that there's a certain amount must go to rural or the smaller communities, and there's so much go to the other. I don't know how it's done, but as it stands now, I'm not happy with this policy as it's worded to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers against the motion? Any further speakers for the motion? That said, Councillor McKay?
No.
Okay. We will go to a vote. All those in favour of the motion? Those against? The motion is carried. Item B 20.74, Community Grants Program 2021 Successful Recipients. Ms. Green, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the exciting time of the year where Council has allocated significant funds for both community grants, which is largely for infrastructure, for community groups and organisations, and event grants, which, as we've just discussed, is for events largely tourism related, but also sporting and community based. Given the COVID situation, councillors will note that the event grants have been poorly subscribed this year. Poorly, that's probably a bit harsh, less subscribed this year for good reason, but clearly the community grants have been well subscribed. The table on page 75 outlines the recommended community grants to be granted, and this process went through with a delegated body consisting of councillors and council staff to go through the number of applications that were received, and you'll see that the 22 projects are recommended, which comes in at about $75,000, which leaves about $2,000 in the kitty for any projects that may come up later in the year. But you'll see that there's a wide variety of projects from lawnmower repairs, toilet blocks and kitchen upgrades as some examples. The Event Support Fund, again, is largely around supporting events and both sporting and community and tourism related. And you'll see that Council had allocated $125,000. That included the money for New Year's Eve. And you'll see that it's only recommended at this stage that $37,000 be allocated to events. And in fact, I need to alert Council that as recently as Friday, the massive Murray paddle has been cancelled. So that contribution won't be required either. We have certainly had lots of discussions with these event organisers around given their position that they are in about whether they can proceed with these programs and these events over the coming less than 12 months now. So we certainly have got agreement with them that if their events don't proceed, Council will hold on to the money but guarantee it for next year if they're proposing the same event for next year. And there certainly were some unsuccessful event grant applications this year, largely based on applications that were not clear and didn't meet the criteria. The Endeavour scholarships that we provide to all the schools provide us with the names of those students that they wish to provide that scholarship for, and the Mayor or the Councillor will present those if it's allowed this year. So the recommendation is that Council approve the selected applications for the Community Development Fund and the selected applications for the Event Support Fund as recommended in this report, except minus the massive Murray paddle event.
Thank you, Ms Green. Any questions, councillors? Yes, Councillor Johnson.
Question, Green. I see that the majority of the community grants are for infrastructure. I think there might be one in there that insinuates it may be training or capacity building around governance, that kind of stuff. Just querying what the one for the Lake Boga Sea Scouts is, enabling collaborative community fundraising events. Have we got some detail on that? That seems like a significant amount without...
I wasn't looking at the councillors that were on that committee. I have got some information here which I'll try and find it, but they may recall it quicker than I can find it.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor? That was I believe that was the Sea Scouts barbecue trailer, because they don't have a barbecue.
Yes.
To be shared with
the school.
okay.
So project.
Can I just request that maybe detail is added? Because to me it looked like it might have been a training session or capacity building or something similar. So it's literally the sharing of the trailer.
Barbecue trailer.
Purchasing or building a trailer and then the use of it.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
With the Lake Boga Primary School. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor McKee.
Yes, Ms Green, in relation to unsuccessful grants, we've got there on page 76, the unsuccessful applicants will be notified in writing and feedback regarding the application will be available upon request. Why don't we be on the front foot and actually give it to them first up so they don't even have to apply for it? Just tell them what's wrong.
I think in reality that's what we do. We certainly do it via the phone. We normally ring each of them as well as then follow it up in writing. So
it's not just the way the report reads. They're going to ask for it.
I agree.
But I think we should.
That's not the reality.
Yep. And just why are we holding so much back in the budget of the of the events, we've spent 37 round figures, we're holding 87 back. Why so much?
The recommendation from the committee was that the events that weren't funded weren't events that met the criteria, so shouldn't be funded. So with a view that we perhaps hold a second round early in the new year, when hopefully COVID has allowed allow things to settle down, or allow a more ad hoc approach if things settle.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor McKay.
Ms Green, how long was the period for applicants to put forward their projects and?
This time,
yes.
I think we commenced advertising in July.
Yes.
So it was 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of the regular applicants, so for like the Country Week tennis, those sorts of things, we alert them very early, so the sort of regular ones, and then it's about going through our town community groups and sporting clubs and letting them know that it's on. And I think it was mid-July when we commenced advertising. Might have even been earlier, actually.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Ben.
Can I just ask what the Blue Pearl Classic is? Is that a fishing competition?
It's a horse race.
Is it?
Trotting horse race.
Yeah.
There you go.
For female
Good
drivers.
question.
Female
Oh, I had no idea.
Female drivers.
Female drivers only.
Female drivers.
Ah,
Yeah,
excellent.
it's the first time I've heard of it. But there's any indication there. Any further questions, councillors? I have a mover, please.
Moving motion, Mr Mayor, as per the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor McPhee, and seconded Councillor
second.
Brenham. Wish to speak to the motion, Councillor McPhee?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, this is just over $200,000 that in our budget we put back into the community events and the community support programs. It is an important piece of our budget that goes out to the smaller communities to able them to do things. I think it's important that we keep this going into the future. They do get a lot of benefit from it, and I think it's very well worthwhile. And congratulations to all those groups, and I encourage other groups, once we're through this COVID stuff, into the future, they do make application to the future, so we can share this money around, make sure we do spend it all.
Thank you, Councillor McPhee. Councillor Ben.
I think that's a really important point that Councillor McPhee makes, is that spending money is certainly, particularly in a time of that we're in at the moment of deep recession, then certainly spending, and the fact that with the Community Grants Fund, these community organisations are going to spend over $150,000 of their own money on top of what we're providing in the grants. I think spending that and spending it locally will certainly help our local economy and these community groups, which is vitally important right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers for the motion? Yes, Councillor Jeff.
I'll speak forward. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Like every year, we continue to provide funding to some fantastic events that run through our municipality. It's good to see a couple of the newer ones continue to apply. The Food Truck Festival was the first one last year, and that was a big hit. We're continuing to support them in kind as well. And it really does just help, the smaller communities and some of the other events that want to come to town to get up and establish. And while we are fairly underspent at the moment, I do encourage, particularly as we get closer to Christmas and hopefully restrictions continue to ease, that community groups and our sporting groups can get out there and reinvigorate their events and get them up and running again, of which we've got money available for them to apply. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Any further speakers for the motion? Any against the motion? There are none. We will go to a vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Item B 20.75, Committee, Swan Hill Leisure Centre. Ms. Green, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Swan Hill Leisure Centre has had what was called the Section 86 Committee under the old Local Government Act, overseeing the operations of the Leisure Centre, largely put in place because, as some councillors will recall, the Leisure Centre was funded by the state government, the 2 schools in town, McKillop and College, as well as council. So it was a committee put in place to ensure that all those users and contributors had a say in how the centre ran. It's largely transitioned to an advisory committee, which still operates and does provide advice to council and the organisation that runs the Centre on Council's behalf in its operation. The new Local Government Act means that the Section 86 committees no longer exist, and we need to transition that committee to a new committee, and the recommendation is that we transition it to a community asset committee, at least in the first instance, subject to the approval of the Education Department, but that we also broach, it's not a recommendation, but we will also commence discussions with the Education Department about transitioning after that to an advisory committee once we get the new committee in place. So the recommendation is that we re-establish the Leisure Centre Committee as a Community Asset Committee under Section 11 of the Local Government Act 2020.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Any questions, councillors?
Got a question, Mr. Mayor. Do we have to appoint council representation to the committee? Like in the past, currently I think it's Councillor Moore and Councillor Young are representatives on the Section 86 committee. Do we need to reappoint them to this committee, or is it?
We will probably come back to you with that. We need to get the Education Department through this, but yes, because there'll be new terms of reference and that sort of thing, which will be based on the Section 86 committee, but in line with the new Act. So once you've agreed to this, we'll develop it, we'll come back to council with the request for nominations as well.
That's fine. Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? Yes, Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Ms. Green. There doesn't seem to be the necessity for a community member to be on the committee. Is that the case?
No, there is a community. There's two community members on the committee at the moment.
Right. Yeah. And that will be in the committee in the future?
Yeah,
or?
well, that will come back to council with how that should work.
So that will come back to council at a future time. Great. Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? If there being no further questions, can I have a mover, please?
I'll move as per the recommendations, Mr. Mayor.
And a seconder, please, Councillor Brenham. Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. They're bringing the committee in line with the requirements under the new Local Government Act. It's required, and they are a committee that do provide good advice and good governance at the Leisure Centre, and just to continue it forward and make sure that we have council representation and community representation in the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Denning?
Only just quickly to say that there's lots of changes happening as per the new Local Government Act, and this is just another one that is one of those procedures that we're probably going to come up with more of them in the immediate future, I would imagine. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers for the motion? Any against the motion? We go to a vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Item B 20.76 remains on the table.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Section C, decisions which need action and ratification. Item B, C 20.15, Simon Seal report. Mr. McLean.
Mr. Mayor, the council seal was used on 3 documents in the last month. A deed of variation of lease, which, as you're aware, councillors are aware, we've been going through a number of those, getting our lease documents tidied up, and 2 Section 173 agreements in relation to subdivisions. So I'm recommending the council notes the actions and endorses the use of the seal.
Any questions, councillors?
I'll move as per the recommendation.
As per the recommendation, seconder please, Councillor Johnson. Do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Item C 20.16, Council Assemblies, record of attendance and agenda. Mr. McLean.
As the title of the report suggests, Mr. Mayor, this is the record of attendance and agenda items for the assemblies over the last month, and they're there for councillors to read. Just recommend the council notes.
Thank you. And the seconder, please.
I'll second.
Councillor Jeffrey. Being procedural, we don't need to debate. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Section D, notices of motion. Community support. Councillor McKay.
Thank you. I'd like to move the motion that, shall I read my preamble first?
Move the motion, please, Councillor McKay.
The council provide greater support to the communities currently within the ward of Murray Mallee to develop tourism and community infrastructure projects to assist their growth and economic development. 2, supports the community of Nye District in project development and applications under the Murray-Darling Basin Economic Development Fund when the next round is open.
Seconder, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, have you? Yes. Do we have a seconder? We do not have a seconder, Councillor McKay. The motion lapses. Item D, 20.9, payment for the use of council's aerodromes and aerodrome users. Councillor McKay.
Yeah, I move the motion as per the report. Mr Mayor, the council was provided with a report detailing the options available for recovery of some payment for the use of council's aerodromes, being Swan, Riverfront, and aerodrome users.
Can I second it, please?
I'll second it.
Seconded, Councillor Jeffrey. Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor McKay?
Yes, Mr Mayor, look, the preamble's there for people to read, but just in further to that, we are spending a lot of money at our aerodrome now. There has been a perceived increase of aeroplane traffic around our area, both in Robinvale and Swan Hill, which is impacting on the community that live in those areas. I think it's a lot of things are out of our control in relation to air traffic. We don't have a lot of control over what's flying above us, but we certainly can have a control over who lands on our runways, both in Robinvale and Swan Hill. When this comes to fruition, obviously we've got to be mindful how this is implemented, because we have local users that use them on a daily basis. We have emergency services that use them, and then you have the, we'll call them, for want of a better terminology, pardon the pun, but fly-by-nighters, who just come in, land on our aerodromes and take off again. So we're just got to make sure we have something in place that covers all of them and gets the best benefit for council out of the people that use our aerodromes, and put something back into the aerodromes that they are getting benefit from currently for nothing. And but in saying that, not being an engineer, but I have been advised that aerodrome or aerodrome runways, as roads, ours are public places. They're open to the public to use, and they must be used to maintain some moisture in the runways. We've got to have planes landing and taking off, because that keeps them in a very good condition rather than just not having anyone land. So it's about getting that balance right, and an opportunity for us as a council, with rate capping and everything else around the place where we can make money in council. This is an opportunity we should look at, is to try and input a cost on those people that aren't from our municipality, that are using our resources, and if we get some fees back from them, I think it's justifiable and a win-win for everyone. And at the same time, we're maintaining a runway to a great standard. As I said before, that we need to maintain that runway as a regional centre to maintain accessibility to all those major towns throughout Australia and further than that. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McPhee. Councillor Jeffrey.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I had a lot to say, similar to Councillor McPhee's motion there. There are some aspects of the community that would like us to be tolling the touch and go flight schools that are currently using Swan Airport, and increasingly in the last couple of months. There are benefits to do this, as they provide a financial input towards the aerodrome, and in so contributes financially to the maintenance of that. But in tolling a public airport, you also put further financial strain on other organisations that do use it. So we need to take into consideration exemptions regarding emergency services that may use it or that do use it, medical services, as well as banks and the posted toll and Australia Post that do use the aerodrome as well. So it has to be considered carefully, and I look forward to a report coming to the future council of what options are available, the cost implications to implement it, and any deterrent that it may have or may not have, on any future flights going to what limitation you can put that to. Yeah, so happy to support the motion, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Any further speakers for the motion? Any against the motion? None? Okay, we'll go to a vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Item D, 20.10, recreational and community allocation of water from the environmental holdings of the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder. Councillor Benham.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, there has been a couple of very slight adjustments to the third point in this motion. The first point is to write to our local federal member, Dr Anne Webster, calling for the urgent establishment of recreational and community allocation of water from the environmental holdings of the Tube to support the social fabric of rural communities. Send copies of our correspondence to the Prime Minister and to the Deputy Prime Minister, calling on them to support the case for recreational and community allocation for water to be made available in rural communities. And point 3, to write to all rural and regional Victorian councils and border councils in New South Wales, asking that they too write to their local federal members, the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder, the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, supporting the case for recreational and community allocation for water to be made available for rural communities.
Do I have a seconder for that motion?
Yeah, I'll second, Mr Mayor.
Yes, Councillor McPhee. Wish to speak to the motion, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, this has come about after talking to, obviously, clubs and associations around our own municipality, and it's just become apparent that we should be asking why not of our federal government. The preamble, as the preamble states, the Commonwealth Environmental Holder has carried over again 320,000 megalitres again this year and has done for the past 4 years. And whilst it's not council's job to determine how much is enough for the environment and all of those types of technicalities, it is our job to advocate for our communities. Now, with Victorian rural and remote communities being restricted because of COVID, beyond what is reasonably appropriate for communities that have had zero COVID cases and therefore being cash flow negative right now, they will be in a position this year to not be able to buy the required water to keep, for example, golf courses green, which also contribute to the environment and the arboretum of trees that they hold and grasses, etc. They may not be able to, some clubs may not be able to water tennis courts, and as we've seen today, junior community sport will be allowed. There will be lots of clubs and associations that hold turf that may not be able to purchase water because of the negative impacts, financial impacts of COVID-19 has had on rural and remote communities. We should be asking and advocating for our community if it is possible for the TUE to release some of that carryover in a grants program or whatever it might be, whatever the case may be, to simply write and ask the question, is this possible? This is an idea. Can you consider it? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Any further speakers for the motion? I'm ahead of myself. Yeah, do we have a second to the motion? Please. Thank you, Les. Rightio.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yeah, look, I support the intent of this motion. I think we have received a letter just today from the Mr Rob Loates, the Chair of Victorian Recreational Fishing Fleet Bodies, and this is not about taking water away from the environment. This is about, as Councillor Benham said, there was a carryover in the last 2 years of 320 megs of water. They are not using all their water. The communities along the river are part of the environment of the river. They need to be maintained into the future. In this difficult time with COVID-19 and into the future with water trading, it's going to become very expensive habit to be able to keep purchasing water for these things. And that's going to play on the mental health of the communities along the river, which is a big thing because sport is a great release for people to get out and recover from the stresses of work, from life in general. If we take away the opportunity for those things to be watered without at least asking the question, can some of it be allocated to these areas? We're not saying take it away from the environment because this is part of the environment. And the fact that they're carrying water over every year is a testament that they obviously don't have it or have got too much water or they're not using it appropriately. They need to get a plan in place so their water is used in a more efficient and effective manner. It could be used twice. They might be able to flood an area, then use that to water the football pitch down the road, the football field down the road, or the tennis courts. Use water multiple times. Let's get a benefit from it. Let's put a plan in place so these things can happen. And this is, I think, the intent of this motion. It's not taken away from the environment, it's to improve the environment. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McPhee. Any further speakers for the motion? Any against the motion?
I would like to suggest an amendment and speak as well. At what point should I do that?
You can suggest an amendment at any time.
Okay, I'll suggest an amendment. First I'll speak against the motion and then I'll suggest an amendment.
You should suggest an amendment, Councillor.
Once you've spoken, you cannot make an amendment.
Amendment first. If you speak to the motion, you aren't able to.
You aren't
Thank
able to
you.
move
So
an
amend
amendment.
and then I can speak.
Yes.
Okay, I would like to add
it second.
that we,
Yeah.
thank you Sharon, write letters to Lower Murray Water applying for concessions for our sporting clubs that are going to have difficulty paying for water this year. It's a more practical, thank you, concessions on their fees for water in this year when they have had difficulty in maintaining their usual income. Difficulties in maintaining their usual income. And a second point, that council assist any sporting clubs in our municipality who are experiencing difficulty to access any appropriate grants or funding available to assist them to irrigate their sporting clubs. Assist any sporting club in the municipality to access any available COVID-19 grants to supplement, to assist them to irrigate their ground.
Mr Mayor, can I point out that a number of our recreation facilities don't access Lower Murray Water, they also access Golden Murray Water or Grampians Wimmera water.
Thank you.
Perhaps the councillor would be prepared to include those two groups.
I'll suggest that myself.
I was going to ask the question.
Wimmera water.
Yeah, Golden.
It's actually Grampians
Grampians,
Wimmera.
sorry, Grampians. Yeah.
No, you're right there.
Yeah,
Grampians in front of Wimmera.
Yeah,
in front of
it's
Wimmera.
confusing.
Grampians Wimmera water and Golden Murray water.
Lots of Ultima and Menangatang.
I want to buy a vowel.
By me.
So they would be points 4 and 5 to that motion if this amendment is successfully carried, Mr Mayor.
You happy with that, Councillor McCann?
Thank you very much.
Right. So do we have a seconder? No, we don't have a seconder, I'm afraid, Councillor McKay. The motion, the amendments lapse and we revert to the original motion. Now, do you wish to speak against this motion?
I shall. I find it quite perplexing that no one's willing to second that motion. It does make me wonder if anyone really does intend to help these sporting clubs in a practical sense at all. Because that would be the most straightforward and easy way to achieve the aim of the motion, which is to assist the sporting clubs in our municipality. And yet no one was willing to second that motion. As I said, I find that perplexing. Because I am a
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Yes, Councillor.
She's debating a motion that hasn't been approved. She should be debating, or going against the initial motion, not a motion that has not been seconded, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank
Point
you.
of order.
Thank you, Councillor McPhee. we did have the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder come and speak to us, and they explained that the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder uses carryover water just as any other user does. And the reason they explain quite particularly that they carry over their water is some of their water, a small proportion indeed, is that they need to use it for the springtime, which is the natural time for flows and floods into lakes and so on. So currently there's a spring flow is scheduled to occur at the end of this month, and it's particularly for Cogs warning, as mentioned by the chair of VR Fish. So just to give an explainer of that, it's not that they have too much water. Our community did experience a great lack of water during the drought and during the time before the basin plan came into effect. There is a lot of propaganda put out about the basin plan, but it is about essentially having enough water for everyone in the community and the environment to use that water, and for the environment to use that water. The environment is not an enemy. The environment, in fact, is the storage place for the water, for irrigators, for towns, for communities. But the vast majority of people who live here love the river, they love Lake Boga, they love the lakes, and they miss indeed the lakes that are empty in our region, including some on the other side of the river. We've recently had an article in our paper joyfully welcoming water to Lake Tuam with swans on the lake. Fishing and recreation and tourism support a lot of businesses in our community. This is under-recognised in the constant and strong campaign against the environmental water holder conducted by large irrigation lobbyists. We all realise that development has gone gangbusters since the drought, and we all realise, and most have a good understanding, that metering and compliance are a concern throughout the basin, and that we don't really have a great understanding of exactly the amounts of water being used. I would suggest that if we want to protect the allocations and the licences of our community, our local farmers and sporting clubs, and the prices into the future, that we would be lobbying the government harder and working more strongly to enforce compliance and metering and regulation consistently across the basin. This is part of a campaign, I see, that's to undermine the basin plan, undermine the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder, which is an ongoing issue, without us looking at the positives. So we do have concerns in our community about blue-green algae. We do have concerns about lakes and areas that are dry, and the process of it is about, unfortunately, taking water from the environment. And we talk about the environment as if it's somewhere where a pack of greenies live, but it's in fact the place where large numbers of people in our community go out and go boating, they go skiing, they go camping on the weekends, it's their holidays at Easter, and we need to be conscious that we're protecting these areas and our water quality into the future. And so I care very strongly about our community sporting clubs, but we also have to look at water management and the Murray River, the Murray-Darling, in terms of the long-term future. We know that the demand for water is going to go up, so I'd say we would be better placed to look at compliance and metering against, and also dodgy engineering projects that aren't going to deliver. Our number one priority has to be that we have a healthy river system 20 years into the future for our children. That will create a thriving economy and a place where people want to live. Thank you.
You have the right to reply, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This motion, as Councillor McPhee said, is a well-intentioned motion. It's not a campaign about taking water out of the environment, quite the contrary. It's a campaign about reaching a compromise with essentially another irrigator that has had more carryover than any of the other irrigators in our area, in our state. It's not about undermining anything, and it's not about attacking the basin plan. It's simply about asking for a compromise in an unprecedented time. It's not just about sporting clubs. This motion is about all sorts of clubs and associations and community groups that maintain a turf, a lawn. It might be a senior citizens group that might need to water their lawn. It might be any sort of association or group, sporting club that normally would be cash flow positive, but due to COVID-19 and the restrictions put on remote and rural Victoria, they are now cash flow negative and may not be able to maintain their environment this coming year. We're not asking it for it to be, and we're not talking about the technicalities and any sort of infrastructure. We're simply asking a question. There is water available. Can some of that be allocated to community groups that are now doing it tough? That's what this motion is about. It's a well-intentioned motion. It's got nothing to do with undermining any sort of plan. It's got nothing to do with anything else. It's just a compromise with regard to keeping community groups and associations green and watered over summer.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. We'll now go to a vote. All those in favour of the motion? Motion's, those against? Thank you. The motion is carried. Item B, 20.11, Swan Hill pedestrian crossing link between the Swan Hill CBD and the Riverfront. Councillor McKay.
Thank you. Council, I give notice, I move that Council request the Department of Transport to include the investigation of a pedestrian overpass as part of the Swan Hill pedestrian crossing project as a matter of urgency. In regard to the location, the most straightforward and achievable option should be selected. The highest priority should be to identify the simplest method to expedite this important project. This will enable both an at-grade option and an overpass to be considered in providing a pedestrian link between the Swan Hill CBD and Riverfront in the vicinity of the railway station.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second the motion, Mr Mayor, at this point in time, just so the council will be heard. But can I ask a couple of questions?
Certainly can.
Possibly staff. The Riverfront Master Plan, my understanding of it was this was looked at, and due to that whole plan, the Riverfront Master Plan came to a conclusion of an at-level crossing and not an overpass. Was this what go through that process? That's my understanding of it.
Yes.
My understanding at a broad level, the Riverfront Master Plan proposes some form of at-grade crossing across the railway line in the vicinity, and I'm being a bit broad here, in the vicinity of the railway station.
Unfortunately, the staff here aren't involved in the Riverfront Master Plan, but my recollection of it was we had looked at an overpass, but I think the design come back with an at-level crossing, not an overpass. Anyway, I'll let Councillor McKay argue the case now.
I am agreeing with the councillor's proposition. That's broadly what it says.
I'll read the preamble. Construction of a pedestrian crossing to link the Swan Hill Central Business District and the Riverfront has been a high priority for council and community. It is a strategic component of the Riverfront Master Plan, considered necessary to encourage business growth and livability. Council has received some funding for the project, but has not been able to obtain approval for the crossing from various stakeholders. Council has persistently participated in discussions and lobbying with VicTrack, V-Line, Regional Roads Victoria, the Department of Transport to gain the approval to enable the construction of an at-grade pedestrian crossing. Recent negotiations have been towards construction of an at-grade crossing and have not been successful. Swan Hill Rural City Council has done great work in upgrading the facilities on the riverfront, and subsequently everyone wants to get there. Likewise, tourists staying on the riverfront are frustrated about the long roundabout walk necessary to access CBD businesses for dining and services. All current pedestrian links to the riverfront are across roads and train tracks. Both routes prolong the journey to the CBD to an impractical length and have safety risks. This is a negative for holidaymakers and residents. To have the link to the riverfront expedited would be an enormous benefit to the City of Swan Hill, its hospitality and service businesses, and for the amenity of its residents and for the enjoyment of holidaymakers. In the long term, it will encourage business and development in the CBD and on the riverfront. The current iteration of negotiations is that a working party has been formed, including the Swan Hill Rural City, VicTrack, V-Line, Department of Transport and Regional Roads Victoria to explore options for the project. In this new round of negotiation, it is important that every option is considered, with the most quickly achievable one being to be prioritised. Speedy completion of the pedestrian crossing project must be the highest priority. I guess that's my argument in a nutshell. Okay. It's of no criticism to any negotiations that have gone on, but that it is an important priority in the current economic context particularly.
Thank you. Councillor McKee, you wish to speak to the motion?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm going to speak against the motion, Mr Mayor. I second the motion just to give the council an opportunity to put a case, I believe, in this situation. The Swan Riverfront Master Plan was implemented over 10 years ago. I think it was about 2008, I think it started, somewhere around that time. It was a 40 or 50 year plan we're talking about, the riverfront. Went through a lot of consultation. We actually won a award for it through consultation in relation to this. There was a lot of involvement with the youth. Everyone right throughout our municipality had an input into our Riverfront Master Plan. It is a living document and it should be apt to change as well. But the fact that this was looked at initially, and this is the people's plan, this isn't the 7 councils around the room's plan that we should change just because we believe something else should happen. Like I said before today, you're looking 40 to 50 year plan, the Riverfront Master Plan is. In that time, I can see the train line north of Swan Hill not being there. The whole plan was about, it just reinvented a plan that was done many, many years ago, similar to Mildura, where the town was built with its back to the river. With the river boats, that was the highway. Now, these days, the river's such an asset to us, we're trying to turn the town around. That's what this plan was all about, and providing access to the river. People drive through Swan Hill and don't even realise how close they are to the river, because they can't see it. And that level crossing, we would continue to pursue that. The idea of that is going to open up our riverfront park to our CBD, show the people, you can actually see the river as you're driving along Kahlua Street, and you've got more of an opportunity to say, oh, what a great asset, let's stop for a while and have a look. That's just one part of it, and I think it's not for this council to change a major project plan like that without some consultation with the community. It had already been investigated, the community was satisfied with the plan that was adopted, and I think it's we're there to represent what the community want. The community wanted an act level crossing. Yes, I agree with Councillor McKay's thing. It has been difficult dealing with the government agencies. It will be difficult dealing with government agencies in the future with many other projects. That doesn't mean we should stop doing them. I think it's important that we maintain the act level crossing and open up our riverfront to the CBD. I think building a flyover makes it difficult for older people, pedestrians to walk across. You're walking up and down a hill. It's about making easy access to our riverfront, and I think this is the way we've got to stay as it is. So I take on board Councillor McKay's opinion in relation to this, but I personally believe we should leave the riverfront master plan as is and continue to advocate for an act level crossing. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. Any further speakers for the motion? There being none, against the motion, Councillor Jeffrey?
Against the motion, yeah, thank you. Yeah, certainly, I'll certainly encourage a bit of a push along to the Department of Transport and to the other agencies that we are negotiating, and we are aware that we are negotiating with a number of departments around access or purchasing or use of land to get an at-grade crossing happening. And we're aware of, I think it was about $20 million which was announced for upgrades to the Murray Valley Highway, which is a long road, albeit, but we're hopeful and believe that part of feasibility is being undertaken as part of that for a crossing at the Macquarie Street intersection. I support the at-grade crossing. I think it's the most all-ability friendly one, and I don't think we should just be encouraging the department to look at the easiest option and the quickest option to build, because it's not necessarily going to be the right one. So yeah, I'm voting against this. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Any further speakers against the motion? Would you like to close, Councillor McKay?
Thank you. Well, I've certainly had my questions about the Riverfront Master Plan before, and we have deviated indeed quite strongly from it. We once had a Murray as a cultural centre planted for on the banks of the river, and that was changed without community consultation. I simply feel that this is such an important project that speed is important, and it would assist commercial businesses, hospitality and retail in our central business district, and that we may be lobbying for many years into the future for an at-grade crossing, and that is my concern. Thank you. I'm disappointed.
Thank you, Councillor McKay. We'll now go to a vote. All those in favour of the motion? Those against? The motion is lost. Section E, foreshadowed items. Do any councillors have foreshadowed items? There being none. Section F, urgent items not included in the agenda. Mr McClendon, do you have any urgent items?
Mr Mayor, we have had one urgent item provided by yourself. If you are proposing to move that, you would need to vacate the chair, but before you do, we better elect a chair. Nominate a chair.
I'd like to nominate our deputy mayor to take the chair.
Mr Mayor, just prior to that, I believe we've got to accept it as urgent business in the first place. If it's not going to be accepted as urgent business, there's no need to remove himself from the chair.
As long as the mayor doesn't speak to that issue, that's okay.
I'm all for the idea of the motion, but my understanding of urgent business, Mr Mayor, is that it must be something that's come to council between the agenda going out and this meeting date. This particular issue has been on the books for a number of years. So I can't consider this to be urgent business, although I already agree with it. And the fact that we already have a motion on the table, I think it needs to rescind that other, remove that other motions in some manner, and not just have this. Otherwise, we've got two motions on the books as to which bridge we support. So I think this is a situation that can wait, and also the fact that that's why just urgent business at the moment. I don't believe it's urgent in the fact that it hasn't come up from the last agenda going out until this meeting.
Thank you, Councillor McPhee.
You've got a rule on that, Mr Mayor.
Yep, okay. I'll ask the councillors, do they consider this to be urgent business? In favour?
No.
No? Against? Everybody against?
Council is clear on what's been...
No.
There's nothing to put.
Mr Mayor, can I make a suggestion? You're being asked to rule on a point of order as to whether you're urgent. I think perhaps it might be wise to have the Deputy Mayor who's been nominated to chair this item step in and chair the item.
Yep.
And whilst the Deputy Chair is coming to the chair, we didn't actually say what the item was. This is Councillor Moore's proposal in relation to the alignment of the Swan Bridge. All councillors have that piece of paper in front of them?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, so if we take on from what Councillor McPhee has spoken against the motion, so anyone, we are, if I'm correct, we're voting on whether we consider this an urgent item before
It's a point of order, basically, Mr. Chair, and you rule on a point of order, not the council, as to whether it's an urgent business. I'm saying it's not urgent business.
Yep.
The point of order under urgent business is any business that has arisen since the agenda has been put out and this meeting.
Yep.
That is my understanding of urgent business. If it hasn't been in that time frame, it should not be classed as urgent business. If it's a point of order, I'm asking you to rule on.
That is correct.
Can we just check the model rules, just the definition there, please?
I'll get to the there's a list of items which I'm going to get to quickly about what can be considered as urgent business. And urgent business is reserved for items which could not have been included on the agenda, but because the agenda had already been produced, but that need to be dealt with, because if they're not dealt with, the matter will have passed through time and evaporated.
Yeah.
That's the general thrust of urgent business. So the question is whether or not this is a matter of urgent business is a matter, I guess the advice to council is certainly this is an issue that is coming before council in respect of community consultation, because we've had advice from Transport for New South Wales that, and we got that advice after the agenda was presented, that they are about to commence community consultation in relation to two options for the bridge replacement, either the McCallum Street option or the former 9A option. Councillor Moore, in presenting this urgent item, is saying that it might be worthy of council having a stated position going into that consultation. If this matter is not dealt with at this meeting, the opportunity for this council to deal with that will have passed, because we will be in the election period, and my advice to council will be that this is most certainly a major policy issue and so can't be dealt with in the election period and so it would then fall to the next council to have a say, by which time the community engagement is pretty much cooked, yes.
Yeah. I'm going to allow it to be considered urgent and allow Councillor Moore to move the motion.
Point of order on the point of order, Mr Mayor.
Yep.
With respect that it's community consultation, because that hasn't concluded yet. We represent the community. Let the community decide. If a point comes about whereby they decide then against 9A or this preferred option or this option to be investigated, we don't even know whether it's I believe it is a viable option, but the community have to decide. We represent the community. We shouldn't be telling the community which one to take. We should be listening to their say, because currently, as it stands, the community's position is 4B or 4B alternative. That's not a question for this bit for the point here, but the point of order, point of order against your point of order, is the fact that we should be listening to the community. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
And so, Mr Deputy Mayor, when your point of order ruling is being challenged, you put it to the vote.
Thank you for that, Mr CEO.
So the substance of the vote is really whether council will allow this urgent item to be considered today or not. That's the substance of the matter.
Right, so I'll put it to a vote, councillors. Those in favour of allowing this motion to be considered urgent, call those in favour. 3-4. Those against. Right, motion is lost, and there is no. That means there's no urgent items.
So we're now up to considering and ordering on council reports.
Section G, to consider and order on council reports. Who's going first today? Councillor McKay.
Oh, sorry. Consider an order on council reports. That is what events we've attended.
Yes.
Yeah. I've attended the assemblies, and I was not at the last council meeting, but I've attended the assemblies and the event committee. Also some community meetings, small community meetings prior to our current lockdown regarding the engineering projects planned for the Nile Riverfront.
Thank you. Councillor McPhee.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, obviously COVID statements highlights as in the quiet time these days. I've had one meeting to go to the North West Municipal Association meeting, and in relation to that last item that was proposally come up as urgent business, Council actually had a meeting with RMS and Vic Roads just prior to our last council meeting. I think it was the day of our last council meeting, and that's why there was nothing not in our report at that time. But we were briefed in relation to the consultation that's going ahead today. I would encourage all the members of the community, if they can, have some involvement in saying what the looking at that proposed alignment. I totally agree with the motion you were trying to put forward, but unfortunately we do have a process and we can't make excuses or change the process just to suit ourselves. The process is that it's urgent, and I don't believe that was urgent at this time. And the fact that I believe this is a decision that we as a council should be making. The last meeting we are able to make decisions. This is a decision the new council could make after the consultation process, and the community are in support of this new alignment. I think that's the time that the council should be changing its position. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Fairly light on, Mr Mayor. A highlight was a meeting with residents out at Ian Lewis Park yesterday to discuss some community planning issues, and it was one of those things that highlighted to me the issues we have around community planning and community groups, in that sometimes we believe we have community groups and we have one or two people making decisions. So it was a really productive meeting that we had yesterday. We had lots of members from the community come and have their say, and we've been able to redirect some of the projects out there in a really positive way. So and kudos to Felicity
for running such a successful gathering. It was really quite positive. So that's about it for the month.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a lot of Zoom and Microsoft Team meetings this month. One was on mental health with some MPs and other leaders and stakeholders in Robinvale, which has subsequently led to this week having the launch of a mental health team on the ground in Robinvale, which is something that should be celebrated. So that's really positive. I've done some Local Government Act Implementation Matters session on the new Local Government Act. Attended some land meetings, school council and the RMS Vic Roads meeting that was held before last council meeting as well.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
I have nothing to report on, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Young.
I've had the usual assemblies in the council meeting. I had an art gallery Zoom meeting this week. A meeting with the Our Place architects. They were the outdoor ones, they were designing the outdoor, and that was just Bill and I, and the architects and the two city council staff. I've had trouble with my service, which I keep saying about the difficulties of service in outlying areas, but I believe that it's been pretty prolific right through the whole area in the last month or so, that I couldn't do the rail freight lines meeting. I just couldn't get into it, so I had no service, and that's quite common. So yeah, I had a meeting today with some members of the refugee committee just about issues with sponsorship of the staff member.
Thank you. And myself, we had a virtual meeting with MRGC, a group of councils, virtual meetings with Mark Gett, member for Northern Victoria, a couple with the MAV, and of course the Our Place landscape and design, which was supposed to be 1 hour meeting and turned into a 3 hour meeting, but it was really good to see what's happening down there. And that's about it. Now, do we need something to move that they be received, those reports, or do we just move? Don't usually. Right. Now, do we have any in-camera items, Mr. McLean?
No, Mr. Mayor, there's no in-camera items for this agenda.
Okay, thank you. There being no more business on the agenda, I declare the meeting closed at 3:42 p.m. Thank you, councillors.